Hey YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. How's it going? So I got some stuff in my mind here. This should be a good week. Things are heating up for the better in a lot of respects for myself. We'll see how things go. Um, so I sent an email to my brother uh, recently where I just was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna tell my brother the most frightening pieces of music I've ever played or heard, or I've here's the thing about this. I as you guys know, I studied music in college at Brigham Young University and Tacoma Community College and Central Washington University, and also the Pacific Northwest Film Scoring Program. Um, if you've been following my videos for a while, and so and then of course you learn stuff all the time, So you pick up on a lot of stuff. At this point in time, I know about. I can't. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's a heck of a lot of composers and songwriters that I don't even know where to start. But so I have a lot of guys to pick from, and when we're talking about, I guess there's not just one thing I'm thinking of here, but really I'm kind of grouping the most frightening music I've ever heard with also the most evil sounding music I've ever heard. Kind of both in the same general um, category, because, in my opinion, there can be some very angry music out there. You might think angry music is very evil sounding, but to be honest, the most angry sounding music I've ever heard, it really is um, a lot of very loud heavy metal and death metal stuff. It's the angriest because it's the angriest kind of music I mean, it's the loudness, the loudness of the music, the aggressiveness of it, and um, if you want to get to darker harmonies, Frank Zappa and stuff, sure, but in all honesty, anger is just pure adrenaline, or it's extremely high energy, and it's extremely it's tons of drums and stuff, and so that's heavy metal. So that's the most angry stuff I've ever heard. So of course, metal is not exactly the most uplifting or godly kind of music. Again, that's subjective, and but anger again is not. It's not the darkest of emotions, although it's the most violent of emotions, so to speak, in regard to music and that sort of thing, and whatever emotional expression. But so I'm kind of my mind's I'm grouping more frightening music that frightens, terrifies, right? I'm grouping that really with evil, because to make again to have an effect on the listener, to make them riled up or angry, to me is a much easier thing to do. It's very, very easy to do compared to actually frightening them. That is not easy. That is not easy, not by any stretch of the imagination, to actually frighten your listener. And so I told my brother, I was like, here's some composers that really know what they're doing in this arena. Of course, some of them right off the bat were, you know, Igor Stravinsky, but yeah, we've had so many scary composers since Stravinsky. Stravinsky has a lot of competition. You guys reach for Rite of Spring, I know. Maybe some of the other guys like Petrushka, Firebird, whatever, but yeah, Stravinsky's still up there. But... And of course, there's the film guys. Lalo Schifrin. Schifrin factors in pretty heavily there, as well as Christopher Young. both those two, absolutely. Um, and then there's, yeah, I'm sure there's others, but those are the main two for me. For well, there's Bernard Sherman, sure. So he did Vertigo. I don't remember who did Psycho. Is that anyway? Some of those old guys have some pretty scary stuff, but older film composers. But uh, the one biggie, man, and then there's Mussorgsky wrote some stuff that's pretty dark. I mean, some of the other Russians, Prokofiev and stuff, and then even Liszt. I heard, some of Liszt's orchestral works are a little bit overlooked sometimes in this regard. The darker stuff, and then um, who am I forgetting? I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. This area. So the big composer here. No, it's not Anton Cézanne de Lavey. Lavey. Well, we can talk about him later, I guess. But Anton Cézanne de Lavey is. Talking about music here, at least. So Lavey was a really good musician. I mean, he had some serious skill on the organ. He's professional level organist, yeah, really, really good, and composer. It's just that his music is not. It's not evil. It's not dark sounding. I mean, even though he worshipped Satan, and has devoted a lot of his music to Satan, it's not. It's not dark. It's not frightening. I know. I think I've made a video about this before at some point. It's just been a while, maybe, but some of the stuff that's maybe I haven't mentioned before. I've mentioned LaVey before, but no. Scriabin. Scriabin, in my estimation, is the greatest of the scary composers. He really is. He wrote some music that, well, everybody's talking about, I guess, what, the Ninth Sonata was really dark and scary, and like, yeah, kinda, sure. He's written some profoundly emotional music, like some of it's just angelic, so beautiful, sublime. Others make you feel like you're out in space. Just, these really emotional things. Like, I love Scriabin. But his sonata, number 6, holy cow. And let me tell you why this is so dark and evil sounding. Because, studying with Tim Hewing, film scoring, uh, just taking lessons from Tim. We talked about some stuff. Tim is over in, I think, Boston still. I'm not sure. But so, I'm teaching at Berkeley or something. But so, we not just, it wasn't just studying with Tim. It was, I remember writing a piece that, music it was for a chamber group. And, yeah, we got really dark. I remember writing a certain section of music that was some of the darkest, most disturbing. I'll use the word disturbing. Some of the most disturbing music I've ever written. And I had to kind of just be in the element of some of my worst nightmares. Just be there, just inhabit that place to really go there. Sonically, musically. Not what I'm really comfortable doing, of course. But there is this another side to me that is. But I had to do that to kind of do music justice. And yeah, it was very dark. It was very, very, oh. And I knew what I was doing harmonically. So Scriabin's Sonata number 6. And just to let you guys know a little bit about Scriabin. This is so interesting because, this ties into all these other questions and thoughts that people have about music and good and evil and things and scary music. But let me get back to my composition process for a bit. So we know that, by the way, that some of the ways in which we can evoke fear in the listener has a great deal to do with some of the harmonies, I guess you'd say. It has a lot to do with the whole tone scale. Not just the whole tone scale, of course. In my opinion, the octatonic scale is not the most effective scale to use. It's darker, but it's not terrible. The diminished harmonies are not as effective. And when using diminished harmonies, the half diminished seventh is probably, on average, a little bit more effective than the full diminished seventh, which tends just to sound very afraid. It's the full diminished seven really is the chord where someone's cowering in a corner, or just in a state of continual, I don't know, ignorance. Just a little bit of a woe is me. But it's it's a very retreating chord. It's a very passive or introverted chord. It's not aggressive. The half diminished seven has more of a eyebrow rising kind of, maybe a little bit more of a frightening expression to it, potentially. The half diminished seven has more potential there. Depending how you use harmonies, sometimes the dominant seven or dominant nine, dominant flat nine, can really be very dramatic too. It can be very frightening. But what it is, it's not the diminished, it's not the thirds that you want. That's they're diminished. It's the tritone. And what Scriabin does is that he uses the tritone in addition to fifths and augmented fifths, and he has these chords that also include additional tritones in them. So he has 2 or 3 tritones sometimes going on in a chord. That is definitely not tertial. It's not tertial. It's quartal or quintal, but more to the point. It's just a chord that has a combination of different kinds of fourths and fifths and tritones and things, along with a few little things in there. And he uses harmonics that are middle or sometimes upper harmonics, but he uses them, well, yeah, he has a very different way of thinking about harmony, so to speak, where the voicing, the spacing is, like, as I said, fourths and fifths, but it's funny because I'm trying to explain how Scriabin's harmony works. And I guess it's just that you guys have to understand the harmonic series a little bit to understand how it works. The first handful of harmonics, the octave, the perfect fifth, the fourth, the major third, and the minor third, they're all pretty consonant. They're all pretty pleasing sounding. You get up to, past seven and past the seventh and eighth harmonic, past those, like the ninth and 10th, 11th, 13th, 14th. You start getting to some harmonics that get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you get more dissonance, and you get more. And then, of course, Scriabin couldn't use the harmonics that existed outside of the 12-tone scale, unless we're talking about microtonality. So I realize you guys aren't exactly aware of what some of these terms mean, but basically, we're not talking about major minor chords here. We're talking about, but at the same time, we're not talking about. We are still talking about purposeful harmony. We're still talking about a composer who's using harmony in a very purposeful way, but more for dramatic effect. Not even if he's not thinking about 1, 4, 5, 7 chords. It's not that traditional tonal kind of deal. It's definitely more along the lines of atonality, but it's not exactly. Um, yeah, the harmonies have a bit more of a "this is the one I want for sure" kind of quality to them, if that makes sense. It's more harmonic. Scriabin's music is more harmonic than most other guys that are less triadic. Everybody's a little different, I suppose. I mean, Copeland uses a lot of open fourths and fifths in his Western stuff, his Americana type stuff. It's a very different kind of sound, of course, than um, Scriabin. But the reason why Scriabin's music sounds so dark is because of these kinds of harmonies that he uses. And sometimes his music sounds, um, well, you get more of these rushes of energy, whether it's something, you know, more. To me, if it's slower and quieter, that's some of the scariest stuff at all, because that's some of the scariest stuff. Period. Because your imagination just takes over. And you're just picturing like these, shadowy figures in the dark and stuff. And then when it's more rapid, um, of course, it's a little bit more frightening, right? Well, it could be. I don't know. It's interesting if you compare Scriabin with Debussy, because um, I we often think, for instance, with Debussy's music, or even Ravel, we think that Debussy, I think of his more pleasing pieces, sure, and Debussy also wrote some things that were a little bit a little funny. He did the funny stuff. He also did stuff that's maybe more mysterious, perhaps a little bit more naturey, but a little bit more cloudy, but foggy, and but we're not sure. A little bit mysterious, right? Um, but Debussy probably would really enjoy Scriabin's harmonies, even though they're even darker than Debussy would tend to write. I'm not sure yet what Ravel would think, but I think Ravel would like it. But Ravel would hear the darkness of it as well. Um, but you see, the funny thing about this is all three of these composers have very different sounds to their music. Particularly, I mean, and I know I'm rolling on Scriabin's darker stuff. Scriabin had some very beautiful other kinds of music. Just I've heard his prettier stuff too. So, but we're talking about some very strong emotions with Scriabin. Very strong. Oh, yeah. And he doesn't hold back. Does not hold back. It's just, I mean, sorry, Rachmaninoff is the same way. Although we tend to hear depression, like even like Chopin, but sometimes I think Rachmaninoff's music sounds could be even, I don't know, both Chopin and Rachmaninoff can be the depths of depression and sorrow. But and of course, we know about the moments of elation with Rachmaninoff as well. But and by the way, Scriabin and Rachmaninoff were friends. This is something I think I knew, but reinforced that. The funny thing is, of course, one was so tall, the other one was so short. And Alexander Scriabin is only 5 foot tall. Anyway, so a few little details. This Sixth Sonata, he played it once for some friends, and they're terrified during the time he's playing it. I mean, Scriabin looked like he was looking off in the distance at some spot that, it's like, oh, is there a demon there or something? But I don't know. It's like, so, but everybody listening was terrified. That's how dark it was. And Scriabin himself felt that there's something about this piece that's kind of, he couldn't put his finger on it, but it was like, I don't know, some kind of curse or something. Or he said some, you guys would have to look this up. It was some pretty scary stuff he said about the piece. Like it kind of haunts you, it has bad luck or something. I don't know. So then immediately after the Sixth Sonata, here the Seventh Sonata, which is supposed to be happier. Like it's recommended. Someone actually said in the YouTube comments, like for like Sixth Sonata, someone said after playing it, like you might want to play the Seventh Sonata, because it's, man, just trust me on this one, you know. And then the guy said, "Are you what? Are you kidding me? I mean, for me, like what, you kind of baby, you know, that kind of thing, right?" And anyway, I'm gonna cut through that, fast forward through that stuff, but basically, I guess the segues into some other stuff here. You guys could probably get the gist of what they're talking about. But the thing is, you know, after hearing the Sixth Sonata, I think I've heard it before, but I might have heard it more passing than past, but I really was listening this time, more recently. I've heard it more than once now, and there's something about the Sixth Sonata that is the best word I know how to describe this is, I think, um, well, Scriabin had some very real. I don't know if I use the word belief, but he had some. He believed in himself. He was actually kind of fond of Nietzsche. Kind of a I am God rather than we all need to just pray to God. Like I am God. So a little bit more of that train of thought. And but Scriabin was quite sensitive to different things, qualities of good and evil, and you know he definitely thought about these things a lot, a fair amount. He had a sensitive side to it, for sure, absolutely. Um, very sensitive, very, very deep thinking, very profoundly so. Both he and Rachmaninoff are that same way. But before I say anything else, I should say Scriabin, in my opinion, was a very good man. He's had a very kind heart. He's had a sensitive soul. Extraordinary pianist, of course. Um, yeah, man. So, anyway, um, this all being said again, you know, the most frightening music I've ever heard, out of everything I've ever heard, and, you know, Schifrin is up there for sure, man. His original Exorcist score was really dark. Um, you know, and of course Schifrin does a lot of stuff with percussion and things too. I've played George Crumb. I've played, I think it was Lutoslawski or some other Polish guy. Well, and then of course Pierre Lunar. It's all the anyway. I've heard a lot of avant-garde stuff, a lot of it. Most of the time, when you're listening to the modern guys, most of the time, the effect is something kind of like, well, okay, kind of shrug your shoulders and stuff. Strabin is in purposeful with his harmony. He has melodies or this um, melodic material that he uses. So there's something, you know, you have a melody, you have something you could sing. When you have a melody in a piece, as opposed to some music that doesn't really have a clear melody, of course, which that's, you know, some of the avant-garde music, much of it is like that. But when you have a melody, it draws the listener in more. They're more present mentally in the music. They're taking it in. They're there. So once a listener is hearing a melody and they're more absorbed with the music in the moment, then they can begin to feel emotions more keenly. Because a lot of times what happens is when you're listening to a lot of these avant-garde pieces, you just don't get into the mood. You don't feel very much of anything. You might not, but you're gonna you can often feel a bit confused, a bit what's going on here, and that's much of the whole reasoning behind a lot of avant-garde music. So, on some level, yeah. So, but no, but it's so because you have a melody, because you have these really dark harmonies, that dissonant, it creates the perfect environment for truly frightening music. Now you could have music that's great for jump scares, things that like you're chasing, someone's being chased, or you can have some very nightmarish music that's very like, oriented around the timpani. Imagine like a big, huge giant, well, not a giant, but like even a very tall figure with a very frightening face. Some guy looks, some entity looks like it's on stilts, racing towards someone. Exaggerated walking in the dark, something like that. You can every time that tall entity is makes a step forward, the timpani's banging away. You can do that stuff with percussion. It's very frightening in its element. Oh, of course. I know exactly what I'm talking about here. Oh, yeah. Well, look, Danny Elfman in the Batman score had a lot of percussion. But admittedly, a Batman is, they're after a pop sound somewhat too. So, kind of. But they're, you're talking about Batman here, Joker. So, there's certain limits that Elfman was in his element, so he knew what he was doing. But okay, getting back to Scriabin. Scriabin was a sensitive guy. He had, I think he was a great guy. So we often wonder to ourselves, is there some, when you write a piece of music that's very, very dark and frightening and whatever, is that some kind of bad reflection on someone? Because the converse is true. With some music that's especially godly sounding, you often feel like the person who wrote it is a very good man. I put a lot of stock in that, of course. Is the reverse true? That if you write something that's very frightening sounding or very evil sounding, that's some kind of a bad, that says something bad about the person who wrote it. So we often think, for instance, Stephen King is a very well-known horror writer, for instance, probably one of the scariest horror writers. And Christopher Young is often considered the Stephen King of film composers. Is Stephen King a bad guy? Is Christopher Young a bad guy? Uh, is Alexander Scriabin, is he a bad guy? Well, in the first place, Stephen King, when I've heard that critique of Stephen King being a shady guy, it has a lot to do with what you put in a book is very a bit more cut and dry. It's black and white. Stephen King is a hippie basically. He doesn't put a whole lot of stock in being chased, more or less, and that's the gist of that. It's just that that's only one element of being not so good, which is often more associated with, again, the very particularly strict religious sorts that I myself am a part of that group. It's just that we also acknowledge that sexual indulgences are very common. So yeah, we probably wouldn't say King is an evil person. We just say his imagination runs to that arena very readily. All right, but not especially chaste there. So, but that's about as far as it goes. Stephen King is not a crazy guy. And Christopher Young, I don't know much about what he's like. I think he's like Stephen King is just very, very intelligent. He knows what he's doing with scary music. And by the way, some of the soundtracks to Sinister really are quite frightening. I would put the Sinister soundtrack as one of the most frightening pieces of music I've ever heard in some places. It's approaching Scriabin's. Scriabin's Sonata Number 6 and the soundtrack to Sinister are some of the scariest stuff I've ever heard in my entire life, musically. Hands down. Those two things. Oh my gosh. And Stravinsky's up there a little bit, but still not quite as dark as those two guys. And Schifrin too, yeah. Again, there's some other guys I'm forgetting about, but yeah, Scriabin's only a 5 foot tall guy. By the way, it's nice and cold in my room. I like that. It's been so hot recently. So Scriabin is we'll talk about what kind of person he is, right? I honestly believe that. Well, I have to wrap this video up. I might get a second one here in a sec, but I honestly believe that it often comes down to sensitivity with regard to music. That the best composers, in an emotional aspect, are often the most sensitive types, because they're sensing more of. Well, I'll make a part two in just a second. You guys take care. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.